Hello and welcome again to another episode of Battle Ready.
Ready.
And today, we've been talking the past couple times about painting models,
Mhm.
and we thought we'd talk a little bit about painting terrain. How is painting terrain different, or is it exactly the same? I will say that starting off with, I'm not a big painter. I don't love painting. I should say that. I painted a lot of models, but I don't love painting. That's not the part of the hobby that I really enjoy. But I hate painting terrain. Hate might be a little bit too strong,
Meat
but I
trees.
strongly dislike painting terrain.
Were the meat trees the only ones you actually hated?
That's just because I painted so many of them. I probably painted
12.
at least 6.
You painted 12 because there were 4 at each box.
No, there weren't 4 in each box. I think there were 2 in each box.
No, there were 4 in each.
But and anyway, painted way too many. And I really dislike it, and it's not as fun, and it takes or can take a long time, and and ultimately the terrain is not the special thing, right? What's the special thing?
The centerpiece models.
Well, even not the centerpiece, just the models, right? The models are special and cool and run around the board doing stuff, and the terrain is just there to
Mess them up.
block line of sight and make them move around. So it's not super cool. But we have some thoughts and some tips on how to do terrain. Drake, how much terrain have you painted?
Not that much.
Drake has done a little bit. He did from the Kill Team Octarius box some of the scrap piles, or at least he's done on. I don't know if he's finished any of them, but he's worked on several of the scrap piles. What do you think the difference is between, or what should be a good difference between terrain and models?
Terrain, a lot of the stuff is bigger.
Mm-hmm.
But with the scrap piles, it was so many different colors. Like this had to be blue, but this had to be green, but this had to be turquoise.
Yeah, so that is one thing I think when you paint a model, you want to bring out a lot of the details, right? Now maybe you skip some details because you're just doing a sort of a battle ready thing. You just want it to look good for the tabletop, so you don't need to highlight everything, right? But you still want to pick out the details so it looks good, right? That if you were going to paint a pouch a different color or a gem or something, if by painting it a contrasting or different color, you can see it sort of on the tabletop, right? So it looks good. Whereas if you paint it all the same color, it doesn't look good. But with terrain, oh man, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. For terrain, I really feel like you should minimize the amount of detail you want to pick up. And the reason is the terrain should not be the centerpiece. It shouldn't be the war game featuring Terrain Piece 3, right? It should be your models and your cool story and the narrative you're building at a place that happens to be a place, right? Not the terrain. So I think in cases like that,
well, this is like Balloon Trend or something.
Yeah, I mean, if faction terrain, you might want to put in a little bit more effort, but it's up to you. And I really think that what you want to do is pick a terrain piece, pick a few colors, and then make super big use of block coloring, dry brushing to get some contrast on there, and washes. And that's it. And when we say washes,
when he says washes, I don't know how to do washes.
Well, for terrain, you don't necessarily want to use your expensive Nuln Oil or Agrax Earthshade or something like that on a big terrain piece. Thank you. No, instead, I feel like you should make your own if possible. There's lots of YouTube channels that can tell you how to make a wash with a lot more detail, but the simple version is you get some black, if you're going to make a black wash, you get some black acrylic paint, mix it up with some water, or paint medium if you have it, would probably even be better. Lots, so that just a little paint to a lot of water. Then you put in some flow improver or a couple drops of dish soap is what I've used before, and you get a ton of wash. Is it as good as the expensive stuff? No, but does it need to be? No, it doesn't need to be. So I think that's the first step when painting terrain is just keep it simple. Keep it simple. Don't try to go all out crazy style on the terrain because it's not worth it. I mean, if you're making some kind of display piece or you want to do something super fancy to push yourself, more power to you, right? But if you're just trying to get some terrain that's going to look good on the table, really, you can do a lot less on terrain than you do for your models. What else?
Don't pay attention to detail, like you said.
Yeah, I think that's the number one thing. I mean, if there's a couple little details here and there that you want to pick out, a pipe or a plasma generator or something that will look cool, go for it. And I think you can do that on terrain. Pick out a few little details, but don't feel like you've got to paint every little bit and bobbin on there. The other thing, I almost never paint the insides of terrain. If you can't see it, it doesn't get painted. There's no one's going to be looking at your terrain that close. What are some other things we do with terrain? I think that I paint to a lower standard on terrain. I also make super heavy, depending on the terrain. Like if it's a big box, like a bunker or something, I don't do this. But with the meat trees, I used a ton of contrast paint. I mean, just a ton. And that's it. And I did no highlighting up, very little dry brushing, depending on what it was I was painting. And I would just hit it with the contrast and be done. And for terrain, it looked fine. The other thing I would say is when it comes to terrain. So when we started, we had no terrain, right? Like everybody. And
We
so
made the thick clip fences eventually.
oh yeah, first I made from sprues. I made picket fences. They were
Awful.
that hurts. It's hurtful that you would say that.
They were not good.
They were not good. That is true. And so eventually we replaced them with other things. We bought a couple of Games Workshop kits, some ruins, and some other things. And then we looked at other terrain kits. And I gotta say, at this point, we have
a lot.
We have all the basics.
We have red rocks. We have white rocks. Yeah. We have.
Could we get? I mean, we could always get more. Someone wanted to gift me some terrain. I wouldn't say no. I mean, terrain's cool. But because we have the basics, we have enough. I absolutely hate getting terrain that needs to be painted. I mean, if we're going to do something, if I'm getting terrain for Age of Sigmar, I will basically only look at pre-painted terrain. So Gale Force 9 does some pre-painted terrain. There's some other companies too that do some pre-painted, and I'll buy. And it's way more expensive, but to me, it's worth it not to have to paint the stupid stuff. That's the other thing that keeps me away from a lot of 3D prints, is because they come out as a resin 3D print, so you have to paint them yourself, and that's a big pain in the butt too. So pre-painted, or on a couple of occasions, I've convinced Drake's mom, my wife, to paint a couple of terrain pieces for us.
The Osgiliath terrain that we've used sometimes.
The Osgiliath terrain was painted by her. One piece of 40K terrain was painted by her. And
the 40K.
That's the best. That's the best. Now, does it come out the way that I would have done it, or the way that maybe I had thought in my mind? No, it comes out the way that she likes it. But did I have to do it at all?
No.
No, I didn't have to do it at all, which makes it the best paint job there ever was. So I think when it comes to terrain, the most important aspects are keep the purpose of the terrain in mind, right? If your purpose is to provide a cool thing, a little immersive thing on the battlefield while your guys are fighting, only paint to that standard, right? Don't feel like you've got to pick everything out. Don't feel like you're going to highlight a lot of stuff. I mean, I don't, other than dry brushing, I hardly ever highlight anything that's terrain.
I have dry brushed one model.
Dry brushing is good on models too, or it can be depending on the model. But it is a good time saver on a lot of cases, and it certainly is in terrain. Just use those time savers, dry brushes, washes, stuff like that. And then just get it to a standard that's good enough, right? Just get it to something that's going to look fine on the tabletop and is not going to overshadow your models, right? Because if you paint your models to normal standard, and then you decide, oh, I'm going to paint this is going to be the best war bunker, this is going to be the best ruined tank, this is going to be the best broken down house or whatever that ever lived, I'm going to put so much effort into it. Then maybe people, when you're playing the game, the focus isn't on the model so much, it's on the terrain. And that's sort of a shame. Sort of a shame, because the focus should be on the cool models, on the cool little plastic mans that you have and you spent time on. That's where your focus should be. So I feel like when it comes to terrain, one, it's awful and I hate it. But two, when I do it and when I have to do it, just put in just enough to get a fine product on the table. Don't worry so much about the detailing. Use the time-saving techniques, and then move along to models. Now, when you paint, what do you like painting better, models or terrain?
Models.
Why?
They just seem like I can spend more time on them.
Why?
I don't know. They just do feel like that.
I think you're right. I think it's because models are more characterful. Maybe you have something like Gloomspite Gitz, which is sort of fun and silly. Maybe you have something that's, a imposing Chaos Lord, and so it's sort of cool. But when you're building or painting the guys, or you've got a big Auric, you're like, this guy looks awesome. Like, you can, as you paint him up, you can see him sort of come to life, and you can get these ideas in your head about what this guy's going to do on the battlefield and how he's going to destroy his enemies, right? Yes, exactly. But when you're painting a piece of terrain, at least for me, I don't feel that way. I feel like, okay, I guess we're on wall number 3 now. This one was also going to be gray. It's like it's not super exciting. So I think it is funner to paint models because you can see them grow and become good characters in your mind as you paint them.
Yeah.
And that's just not true for terrain.
Yeah.
And
unless the terrain is a heap of corpses.
Even then, let me tell you, I painted 80 zombies for Soul Blight. By the end of the 80 zombies, I was sort of over the whole narrative thing. I was like, just get these zombies done. Pants, next. Shirt.
So did you line them up in ranks of 10? Or?
I can't remember exactly. I lined them up in different ranks so that everyone would be painted a little bit different. Anyway, so that's our thoughts when it comes to painting terrain. Do you have any final thoughts? Yeah, so definitely, if you don't have any terrain, get some. Now, if you're just using, red cups and, your lunch pail and stuff like that to create some terrain, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, definitely start there. That's better than having a completely flat board, for sure.
Yes, we know it. We know what it feels like.
But I feel like if you start to get into Warhammer, and if you start to feel like, okay, I like this game enough that I'm going to play it many, many times. I'm going to really start to, invest in this and make the experience as good as possible. Getting some terrain that looks more like that world is probably good. And when you get it, don't go crazy painting it. Don't go crazy. Just, slap some primer on it.
Slap chop.
Don't slap chop it. Couple of base coats. Wash, dry brush. Move along. Back to your models. I'd be interested to know, put it in the comments below, your thoughts on painting terrain. Do you have, does anyone enjoy painting terrain? If you do, let us know. And what tips do you have about getting terrain finished and to an acceptable quality such that, they make the game better?
Yeah.
This has been another episode of Battle Ready.
Ow!
Thanks so much for watching.